the regulatory backup. The DSO, of course, those key explorable results are kind of interconnected among each other. And we have seen there is some functional dependencies, like something is a requirement for something else to work, and also something that is not necessary, but it's beneficial. So there is a positive feedback loop that is built. If something works, something else is going to work better. Now, in terms of scalability and replicability, this was the very last task we had, and we are still completing. By the end of June, we're going to have the deliverable out. What do we mean about scale and scalability potential? So we have tested some solutions in terms of some neighborhoods, some specific buildings, a particular region in a city. What happens when we change that scale and we go up to scale up that solution? Can we accommodate different requirements? Can we adapt to the different systems specific of a different scale? That's what we analyze when we talk about scalability potential. Replicability, we tested something in Italy, we tested something in Denmark. What happens when we go in Czech Republic? What happens when the regulation changes, when the socioeconomic characteristic, they change? This is the kind of question we ask, and we talk about intranational or international replicability. Of course, that's quite logic when we are within the country and outside of it. Regarding the harmonization of services, we've seen quite a high scalability potential. So we're talking about harmonizing the different actors in the electrical system, and the software, it's quite can function at different scales. So it's quite ready to go up to the national market. Now, there is a dependency, of course, on local grid congestion. So we want to harmonize, but there is also the grid congestion, and there can be orchestration can solve the problem of congestion, but we see also how do we manage the congestion? Do we do software? Do we go into operation, or we go into infrastructure and grid updating? That is the kind of question or dependency with the software we have here. In terms of replication, it's quite moderate high. So we talked about agnostic. We can use different algorithms or standards. Would be relatively easy to adapt to country, but dynamic tariff structures currently it's limited, especially for DSO bilateral contracts. You can ask more questions, of course, to DTU, to Mattia, who's the lead on the key explorable results. This is a little bit of a visual about the scalability and replicability potential. We're going to do the same also for the second key explorable results, the crowd balancing platform. So scalability potential, very high in this case. Since built on cloud infrastructures, it doesn't really care about how the congestion is. And we already have a proven track record to manage large-scale European mass adoption. In terms of replicability, again, quite high. We wait for the standardization, we wait for upscaling, but again, using API services kind of helps, and being a modular system, we can kind of easily move into the market. Of course, there is dependency since the CBP kind of interconnects different actors. So how much those are, again, harmonized is going to have a dependency on how much we want to use or how much exploitation the CBP, the crowd balancing platform, is going to have. Again, visualizing scalability and replicability. Finally, DSO technical platform. In this case, again, modular software design, so the scalability, it's quite high. We have independent models, which allow the computation to go with the user growth without suffering too much. So different scale, more users, not too much strain on the system. And also unit cost reduction, so there is some potential profit out of that. In this case, the replicability, so changing country, changing regulation, this kinds of the DSO market and how it interrelates can be quite dependent on the country. So in this case, you can ask a little bit more. We're going to have a conversation actually about how the DSO market or different markets, different European markets can kind of adopt these kind of technical solutions. Again, a visual for this. And related with exploitation, we've been asking ourselves, of course, how can we support exploitation and other actors to adopt flow solutions? But we've realized that flow is quite a technical, if you've realized until now, project. So we had in mind to present some results to some cities, some what we call follower cities. Again, the problem was we couldn't really come up with a product, a particular service to test and to replicate into these other cities, but we come up with what we call the expert panel session. So the idea was to get the needs, the demands, the challenges of those cities. We have on the one side Romania, Alba Iulia, in Italy, Milan, and in Spain, Vitoria-Gasteiz. For this, we've been surveying those cities. We've been seeing a little bit of commonalities and common problems among them, especially the low adoption. We go about 1% fleet share up to 3.5, quite a unique case in northern Spain. But everybody kind of lamented the problem of the data, and everybody kind of has a sense for what V2G is and how can that be exploited. But again, there was the regulatory framework and cases of uncooperative DSOs, which were kind of common among the cities. So 3 countries, 3 different cities. We wanted to get with them a possibility to kind of offer the insights we've developed in these 4 years, also given the different points of view of Flow's consortium. So actually that is happening next week, to have the closure of Flow trying to communicate externally and to replicate solution. In this case, it's going to happen on a more high level way, but insights are getting out there, and that I think is the most important thing. With this, I think maybe we can go back to the Slido. Josh, thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, if you can stay it, and then I can navigate this, and then you can curate. So, here's the, let's see. Okay, it just jumps right to the question. Okay, so now it's an active poll. It's open now. You can see the number again if you didn't get a chance to join. But it's essentially, you saw the list of the exploitable results that we had. I think the real question is, which one do we feel like at this moment, which tools or services are the highest priority in your perspective for advancing EV flexibility provision? So again, the focus of the project, we developed all these tools. Coming out of it, which one do we think are the most valuable? And I think you can click multiple as well if you want. We'll check if, in the meantime, if there are any questions as well online, or we can take a moment now if you have any questions. Maybe on the technical side, I saw the recording stopped. Should we start that again? Do we know if it started? Sada, can you check if the recording has started? Maybe it had a hiccup. Okay, so now, any observations on this, given that you've worked so closely with all these explodable results? There were, again, 17, right? And then so these are sort of a representation of those. But we have, see if we can scroll down. There it is. So clearly stakeholder orchestration, very high. Market platforms, then improvements to user interface and experience, planning solutions, operational charge management, so optimization type solutions, EMS, and then battery degradation management down at the bottom.
Just a quick comment. That's kind of in line with what we've seen as the most scalability and replicability potential. Like we've interviewed key explorable results managers to rate the level of scalability potential and replicability potential, and that was why we've selected those three. And kind of valuing them, yeah, we've seen that practically the needs are the basic functioning of V2X and bidirectional charging, especially when we're talking about millions of vehicles connected. I see it comes third, the user interface and experience, but we've seen how vital is that the users are using the technology, maybe not having to choose too much, but to have them on board, and to those kind of problems like hugging or having the user experience really smooth. I think it's something we haven't touched too much on our replicability scalability potential, but I think it can cut lots of potential out of the market of V2G users or people. They are helping the grid, whether consciously or unconsciously. And finally, priority. Yeah, I think the orchestration, the communication comes with the semantically, it goes to interoperability for me, and with ensuring behind, in the background, those actors, they are talking to each other, they are doing the efficient moves, high level, and there are standards kind of backing that up. So just quick comment on my side. But yeah, the need of those three was quite evident from both people they've developed that, and interviewing a little bit the consortium itself, it came quite evident. I think also in the V2X cluster, there was some more work on the battery degradation. There was some group devoted to that. I think as flow, we've seen the need of those top three. So I totally agree with the assessment.
Thanks. Okay, so I think we move on to the next. Oh, well, maybe stop for a moment if there are any other questions. I didn't see any online. And inside of the recording, everything. Okay, very good. So thank you, Alberto. Okay, so now we move to another poll, and this will be as an intro to the next topic as well. So hopefully get you set, thinking about the area that we're focusing on. So now moving, again, way forward, EV flexibility policy discussion. And so here's the poll. So given the new policy landscape, so you heard before, Filippo mentioned what was the world we moved into. And if you've been at the Sustainable Energy Week, you hear about the world that we're in now. And Gorkam's going to come up in a moment and give some insight on, again, this new world that we're living in, sort of summarize some of the advancements there, particularly in bidirectional. But given, yeah, so I can read the question. Given the new policy landscape, what's the current most important barrier or barriers, again, you can select multiple, to enabling mass deployment of bidirectional EV flexibility? Okay. So maybe, Gorkam, if you want to come up. maybe we can come back to this one as well at the end after you've had your discussion. But yeah, maybe we can absorb it. So we have already 20 responses. So maybe there were a few more last time. Maybe we can give it another second in case they're there. Okay. So yeah, maybe you can introduce yourself and then.
Well, yeah, thank you, George. Yeah, this is Görkem Turar. I'm a police officer at e-Mobility Europe, and I mean, my first reaction to these results is that, well, of course, these are all relevant demands or requests for policymakers to tackle, but I think regulatory harmonization is a broader term that is almost covering many aspects here in this survey. So an overall harmonization of the regulatory framework across the union will help a lot in terms of smart meter deployment to harmonizing grid codes and communication standards. So I also voted for regulatory harmonization because I think this is the most comprehensive approach. And I see all the other factors more like detailed approach, so bottlenecks for enabling V2G or bidirectional charging. Yeah, I mean, maybe in the next slide, I can already introduce some ideas that actually to show you that European Union has been already working on supporting bidirectional charging through shaping the regulatory framework in the EU. So, for example, I remember that one of the bottlenecks identified in the survey was the need for better harmonization or synchronization between stakeholders. And actually, in that regard, EU directive EU regulation AFIR actually mandated the communication standard -20 for V2G, and that is going to help with interoperability. And its implementation will start already for public and private chargers, both for AC and DC in January next year. So this should already help with taking V2G going beyond the pilot projects, and more EV brands and chargers are capable of maybe supporting V2G. And in addition to that, European directive on EPBD, which is actually helping with the deployment of chargers at the buildings, is also supporting smart charging, and where relevant, they encourage the deployment of bidirectional charging capable chargers at certain buildings. And in that regard, Commission's guidance already guides member states to help identify what are those cases that bidirectional charging is the most relevant. And basically, they are referring to locations such as office areas or places like that where the bidirectional charging could be most useful. And then they are really warning member states to not to consider maybe chargers at the highways where there is no business case for bidirectional charging. So all those details actually have been taken into consideration by the European decision makers and have been communicated to the member states. And then, of course, having an ambitious CO2 standards is important to have a healthy demand for electric vehicles in the future as a preliminary for V2G technology. And then I would love to also mention that it has been also mentioned here the need for more transparent, open, and at no cost data sharing between different stakeholders related to the battery data. So this has been also addressed by the different EU legislative frameworks, such as Battery Regulation, Data Act, Renewable Energy Directive, and basically, yeah, they should also make it possible that battery-related data such as state of health, state of charge, location should be shared, made available at no cost. Of course, the implementation of these provisions have been very slow. So far, to my knowledge, no member state is making it possible. but we have the regulatory framework enabling these. And actually with this slide, my main message is that actually V2G is a concept that is more and more known by the European policymakers at the moment, and they are taking measures to support it. But of course, the picture is not complete. We are still missing too many elements to be addressed at the EU level, but also then the implementation at the national level is so slow. So we need to address those points for having really enabling regulatory framework for scaling up bidirectional charging. And here I would like to emphasize a few points that in addition to this existing EU regulatory framework that I just mentioned, European Commission is currently working on V2G regulatory sandboxes for member states to voluntarily participate, and those regulatory sandboxes will be a kind of regulatory testing environment for member states to test and determine what are the enabling regulatory legislations or regulatory framework for upscaling V2G. And apart from that, around this summer, there will be more developments regarding the grid network codes for demand response and requirements for generators. This will enable V2G, and also EU electricity directive mandates the deployment of smart meter at certain locations. And in addition to that, European Commission is currently working on a legislative proposal on network chargers, and which will also which is currently aiming to also make the deployment of smart meters more common in the EU. So definitely European Commission is aware of our bottlenecks, and they are addressing it. But of course, as I mentioned, the picture is not complete. And in that regard, we still need to policymakers to prevent double taxation of bidirectional charging at some member states. And we also need we need some amendments in the Measuring Instruments Directive, which is a directive that is actually specifying certain technical requirements for measuring instruments in the EU to be placed in the single market. And in that regard, the nuance of making measuring instruments capable of bidirectional charging measurement is also important. And finally, without having a harmonized or harmonized approach to bidirectional charging in terms of what it is and what are the functionalities or roles in this technology, it's not possible to have it going beyond the pilots. And in that regard, European Commission expert groups actually have just published report to inform policymakers about those terms and what they should mean. But of course, this is non-binding, and we need the same definitions across the EU regulatory framework when it comes to what smart and bidirectional charging means, and more specifically what they refer to. So yeah, as you can see, still so much needs to be done, and yeah, that requires a lot of communication work from our side. And maybe I'm going backwards in the slides, or yes, okay. Yeah.
Did you want to look at one in particular? Okay, great. Yeah, and just an observation, I was looking to see from the poll, and it seems like there was interest in some that were in the making and some that were still to be done. So looking forward, I mean, still lots to do as always. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think Filippo can present, and then everyone can come up after. Thanks.
Okay. So hello, good afternoon again, good evening maybe. So I'll take 5 more minutes of your time in order to present you some of the results of one of the last activities that we did within the project in the last months, and was to try to identify some recommendation on new policies and regulation that, according to us, could support vehicle grid integration diffusion. So just a few seconds to show you the process. We started actually trying to identify and analyze, understand which are the most relevant elements that actually have impact on BGI solutions. We did this through different instruments. And then once having understood a bit more about the content, we decided to adopt a use case based approach. So we identified 15 use cases that, according to us, are the most suitable for VGI implementation. And then for each of these use cases, we analyzed the user objectives, so point of view of the user, the system benefits, the present challenges or needs, and then the present solutions. So we gathered a lot of challenges and solutions. Then, considering that we are addressing policy and regulation, we selected the solution that can be more easily supported by regulators and policymakers. And then we decided to summarize them in a shorter list of 7 final recommendations, more general because they include also the other ones. And then one thing that we did as last, we decided to go back to the use cases and try to map the recommendation on them. So try to see which one are more related to one of the other. I'll show you more in a few minutes. But okay, just go directly to the recommendation themselves. I'll just very quickly present them. The first one is to support installation of smart chargers in locations where EV can charge during daytime, so especially workplaces and park and ride facilities. This should be done together with the second one, so adopt tariff schemes that clearly imply, let's say, at least 3 levels of prices. So very low prices during low demand and high renewable generation hours, low prices during off-peak hours, and high prices during peak hours. Then number 3, we should kind of push for harmonization and common implementation of communication protocols, trying to overcome one situation that also Mattia was presenting before. So this kind of closed EV and charging station setup that is becoming common right now, both for Simply Smart, but also for bidirectional charging. Here I see harmonization and common implementation because most of the time, just being compliant with one standard doesn't mean that you're really interoperable. We know that. 4th point, simplify flexibility market rules. So mostly for aggregators, for BSP that need to aggregate vehicles and distributed resources. And also, again, we have different possibilities here. Then try to tackle the issue of double taxation, so trying to update regulation, but at European and national level, of course, for bidirectional schemes, and also try to allow seamless AC bidirectional charging throughout Europe, so mostly trying to harmonize grid codes. We have already seen something about that. Number 6, we go towards user. So, of course, it came out quite clearly that we have to increase user awareness on the opportunities provided by flexibility schemes for EV charging. And last point, we should promote research activities and pilot projects where we still have some open aspect. For example, here we include battery degradation, but also orchestration architecture between DSO and TSO, global and local markets, and what else. And here, just one last minute to comment this. As I was mentioning, we tried to map the recommendation on the 15 use cases that we determined, and this is the results. So we can have different interpretation of this matrix. For example, we can see that some use cases, for example, the first one that is quite simple, doesn't need too much in order to be actually implemented. We can have just a couple of these recommendations that should apply to this in order to make it feasible. The same for others. We see on the other side that we have more complex situation where we need to work more. On the other hand, if we go through the columns, we can see that some recommendations are only important for some use cases, while others are more general. I see here recommendation number 3 that is about communication protocols, or number 6, it's about users. So this thing, we think we can add some value to the list of recommendations that we propose, and it's something where we can start from in order to have more analysis and a more clear understanding of all this complex context. So thanks a lot, and I think maybe we had a Slido before also on this. Maybe I can answer too.
So this one's a little different. Now you just heard the recommendations, you heard the sort of the justification for each of them. Now the idea is to sort of rank each of these. So instead of just one answer, now you have to sort of put the priority for each of those. And you can kind of click on them and then drag them around if you need to, if you're on the mobile or computer, click and drag, yeah. And in the meantime, we can move to the discussion section, and then we'll make observations on this, our first question. So we can bring up the other panelists. So Gorkum, you had already met, and then we'll also bring up Laia Guitar from EDSO. And since the others have spoken, maybe you can give a brief intro for yourself, and yeah, feel free to take a seat as we get the rest of the survey results.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laia Guitards, and I am a technology and policy advisor at EDSO. I know that most of you know what is EDSO, but for those who are not familiar, it is a European Association for Distribution System Operators, and it is a pleasure for me to be here today and to see the outcomes of Flow. So thanks for the invitation.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I think we probably have enough results. Maybe we can first take a look at these and then have some observations, and then we have questions. I think there are also some questions in the audience. So it's not as easy to read these as you have to scroll down. But maybe Filippo, you know them best. I can scroll down.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just think from this very first result, I think that one thing that comes up is that so people answering just consider the importance of both what you would say behind the meter services that are probably more related with this, following tariff schemes with different prices, but also, front of the meter services, because probably the point about communication protocols, the point about market rules, so number 2 and 4 are more related to front of meter services. So we don't see that we have a clear distinction. So first start with front of meter or for behind the meter. So that's nice. I think probably the one that are going down is also because Gorgem already presented that something is already going on at European level. So for example, we were seeing about maybe it went up. Yeah, double taxation is number 6, and also grid code harmonization is there, and yeah, and users is more or less not on the higher level, probably not the easier one to push or to adopt through policy or regulation. Which is the last one? Research. I'm sad for that, but yeah, okay. No, yeah, that's again, that's also a good information, meaning that probably we feel that the sector is not so late or not so in difficulty with respect to technology, with respect to these aspects. So probably we feel that we are quite clear to real implementation of this solution. So that can be considered a good result. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, now we had have a couple prepared questions, but you also want to make sure that we catch the other questions from anyone online. So maybe if want to go ahead and take a seat, we can start with those. Maybe I go to. Just keep a few of our recommendations up there. But, so in general, you know, we've had a bit of discussion. There's been a lot of the technical aspects that have been discussed, and we see that there's solutions that are sort of emerging for those. But then from the policy space, now we know that there's activity going on there. We know that there's still areas that need to be improved. So as we were sort of thinking and discussing this, we had identified a couple areas that we said, hey, are these things that could be helpful? You know, we recognize the importance of these flexible connection agreements in the local markets. So the first question maybe to any of you was, should these things be mandated across the EU? We saw how challenging it was maybe to implement in just our sites, but is this a goal that we should work to? For instance, these flexible connection agreements or a local flexibility market, is that a way to encourage it? Is it important enough to encourage in that way?
Maybe I can start. Yeah, I mean, my idea is that since I think many people agree that V2G is still a technology that is developing and is not fully mature, maybe we should avoid over regulation of this technology because market is still developing and changing. And since I believe that regulatory framework should put certain enabling conditions for this technology to scale up, maybe it should be still cautious to mandate each and every detail to the deepest level. So maybe this should come up a bit later. Personally, I agree with the benefits of flexible connection agreements, but maybe I also think that maybe the benefits are more visible when they're applied to charging pools with higher power capacity when there is grid congestion. So maybe thanks to these agreements, they can still have an interim grid connection and they can start operating while they are maybe waiting for a lengthy grid permit. So maybe in my opinion, in a nutshell, maybe each case should not be mandated at this level, but there are certain cases that actually needs support from regulatory framework, and those points should be, I think, prioritized at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, no, actually, I fully agree with no need for over-regulation. However, I think it would be interesting to have a very clear framework that would define when and how this should take place. Because at the moment, I feel that it is a little bit still an open question, how to frame them, how to leverage also the commercial risk that it's that goes implicitly linked to the flexible connection agreement, how to leverage all these uncertainties. I think that they should be defined. And for local flexibility markets, I also think that we should first see the benefits of them and then leverage on that, having them implemented, seeing the benefits, seeing the risks, seeing how they function, and then it will maybe come a time to mandate them. But for now, I think it's too risky.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think both flexible connection agreement and local flexibility markets are really powerful instruments, but probably it depends a lot there. You know, the efficiency depends a lot on the situation. And so flexible contract agreements right now are really useful in order to speed up the process of having charging station in place. And that is really important. Sometimes we have the needs because we have high demand. Sometimes also we have to spend fundings. In Italy, we had this case, so we had to speed up the connection process because otherwise we will have lost public fundings. So that was really important to have this kind of solution. And they are a powerful instrument for the DSO in order, of course, to save money and to save time. On the other side, probably we have some cons regarding, for example, technical possibilities that are offered by these agreements. I see if we have a congestion line and the flexibility is just, if this kind of agreements are just applied to charging station, maybe we have the risk to cut the power there when maybe there would be a need for power, and we are not able to cut the power in other that we could limit because they are more flexible in that moment than the charging process. So actually, for example, that could be possible with local flexibility markets if we have an aggregator that organize and coordinates different resources that are in the same area, in the same line. And so maybe we can have a more optimized approach and just, curtail loads that are less relevant and have less impact on the final user. And then just one last point with regards to that, I think also the kind of engagement and also the value for the final user could be something that should be very well organized in flexible connection agreement, because if you go with an aggregator to a local flexibility market as a user, you have expressed your intention to do that. You more or less know how much you will be paid for the flexibility that you propose, you offer. While I have the feeling that in some structures for the FCA, you will be kind of a passive actor, that you will just have the risk of having let's say, worse service than normal if you have your power cuts. But that's probably more on the concept side, as it was presented before. Right now, maybe we have a lot of capacity. We have charges 22 kilowatts while we charge at 7 or 11. So probably these kind of issues are not so relevant right now. So, but yeah, that's my point of view of that.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like, I mean, all the developments that we've done on the project contribute to this broader knowledge, and we can use that as a way to understand. Also, any other projects, speaking with someone today, and they said they had a number of these FCAs in place, so kind of learning from everyone as opposed to coming in and from a regulatory point of view, forcing it. Okay, thank you. And actually, I think Mattia had mentioned that he had a question, so we can go to that.
Okay, I can do it from here. Just bringing my experience from Copenhagen in this case. Part of the reason because I thought we're thinking about this is what I was excited before. It's a conference for DSOs, and electric vehicles were barely mentioned, just tangentially. And what I've seen in Denmark as well is that DSOs are not thinking about electric cars too much. They're just a part of the problem of overloading and so on and so forth. Then what happens is that sometimes overloads happen, like in the Netherlands, and then electric cars become one of the most important resource to solve this problem, as we've seen in scale. The point is that you need to have the right conditions for that to happen. And I feel like after these years of working on V2G, that the real potential of V2G is in being flexible towards the power system. But at the moment, I feel like the DSOs are not thinking about cars as a real resource. Maybe you will change my mind, but at least in Denmark, that's the case. Might be because of many reasons. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, maybe can I ask a question to what you were just saying? So the way you are framing it, I understand that you see vehicle to grid as something that is it becomes valuable when there is congestion. How about when there is no congestion?
Barely, I would say. At least research-wise, I still have to see a business case where V2G shines so much compared to V1G without involving grid services, because it's a cost to implement it. You need to convince people to have it, but the benefit compared to V1G is minimal in most of the cases. So grid management and flexibility services are the reason why V2G is so special, but I feel like the DSOs are still not considering it too much, unless you have cases like the Netherlands, where then it becomes super important.
Oh, no.
Thanks. So it sounds like, yeah, continuing to identify the business case as well. That Brussels weather, right? Yeah. So, yeah, so plenty of activities then on business case, business model, sort of articulate that value, in particular on DSO side, it sounds like that would be helpful. Okay. Just if you are online and have questions, have those come in. We have some other remarks here, but okay, no questions at this moment. I do have another question kind of similar. Now we've seen maybe in the past few years since the start of the project, and it was mentioned a couple times today when it came to the bidirectional aspects. Hey, there's this challenge that on the vehicle side, how do we actually get these vehicles? We thought in 2022, we thought this is the year that we'll have the vehicles, but now I tend to feel a little bit more that way. I just saw notice this morning GM is going to allow some of their vehicles to do bidirectional. Tesla's looking at enabling it. It might be in their ecosystem, so it won't be this kind of open approach that we had. But anyways, from the GM side, from these others, we know VW could do it. We've demonstrated it with the Kia vehicles. So, and BMW as well, we're working with them on their new vehicle, their new model to do that. So again, I feel like, this maybe really is the year for that when those vehicles come out, but a similar kind of approach. So how do we get ready for that? We've been talking about these, maybe the business models need to be there, but you also need the vehicles to be there. And until you have that sort of critical mass or critical capacity, then you're saying, I can't quite see it yet. I can't quite see it yet, and it does take that added cost. So one of the recommendations before was with public charging, maybe to make that bidirectional. So if it's a public charger, you make those bidirectional by, again, some kind of legal mechanism, or similarly, could you do that for V2G? So all EVs, either fleet EVs or all EVs, have to come with this V2G ready capable features that add some money. Maybe the OEMs are already headed that way, but anyways, in general, try to understand we mentioned that this is the challenge. Is there a way around it to sort of open up that part of the market and to relax some of those challenges, and then that'll let us focus on some of these other challenges. Tough ones.
Yeah, in my opinion, maybe we could also consider mandating communication standards, enabling V2G for certain types of vehicles as well. And I'm referring to maybe some vehicles by OEMs could be branded as bidirectional charging capable vehicle, and therefore they should mandate with a common communication standard that is set by the regulatory authorities, and therefore OEMs are also in the control of their business. And also we can see more and more brands are capable of supporting V2G. Maybe this could be one way to make it going beyond more closed setups. And when it comes to chargers, I think it could be maybe it could prove unbeneficial if I think all public chargers are supporting bidirectional charging, because as I mentioned in my presentation, imagining a charger at the highway, I don't think that there's a big business case for bidirectional charging, because people want to charge their vehicle as quickly as possible and continue to their journey to holiday or wherever they are planning to go. So I think bidirectional charging will not be very useful at those locations, but maybe more at private locations or semi-public locations like office areas or supermarkets or hotels. Maybe these are more interesting cases for bidirectional charging, and maybe decision makers should support charging infrastructure to be capable of bidirectional charging. So maybe we should maybe be careful and have a more nuanced approach and taking into account of the business case for bidirectional charging, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking, as you said, nuance is the key here. All these sort of sweeping recommendations are difficult to implement. It takes a lot of nuance in all these. And yeah, I want to check if anyone else in the room has it. I think we probably have enough time for one more question or another comment. This is your chance. You have us and plus everyone else in the room here.
In the meanwhile, if you want, I can comment something on this,
Sure.
making mandatory for vehicles. I think here one big question is if you are considering more AC bidirectional charging or DC bidirectional charging, because actually it changes quite a lot where the cost goes. So if we mean for AC bidirectional charging, the cost, at least also the effort, goes into the car. So the manufacturer will have to do something more. And apart from the cost, we enter into all the discussion about harmonizing grid codes. We know that in order to sell a car that is able to push energy back into the grid, manufacturers should demonstrate they are compliant with national grid codes. So that will require an even higher effort for them in order to develop the software, or again, even also changing maybe some component within the car. So that will be a bit difficult. While on the other side, if we consider DC, probably also the fact that with AFIR we are mandating the ISO 15118-20, probably this will imply that car manufacturers will follow. Also, Gorkem was mentioning there an automotive act doing for that. So maybe for DC that will be easier to also involve car manufacturer with regards to that. In this case, of course, it will be harder to have a bidirectional charging in DC at home or in places, because the cost will increase quite a lot. I know that it will cost around 8,000 till 9,000 euros, so it will be quite high for final users at home, and also we will need a lot of revenues year by year in order to justify that kind of expense. So, and also I agree with Gorkem about it really depends a lot on the business cases. While listing the 15 use cases, also maybe to comment to Mattia, we tried to select some where V2G actually should work better than V1G. For example, if we have common people that stays at home mostly, maybe smart workers or retired people where the car stay there. We normally think that people that home charger is, you go out for work, then you come back at 6 and you put a lot of load in the grid. But actually, at least in Italy, we are half and half population that goes to work and stays at home, both for, remote working or others. And in that case, the car is mostly parked at home. So when it's charged, if you're not able to discharge it, you won't have any services available. And so in this case, it will be helpful. Or again, another case could be big parking lots, for example, in airports. You have a lot of cars parked there. We exactly know when people will come back to pick them up. And again, if we consider to modulate the power, but just charging, maybe after 10 days, they will be charged and we won't be able to do so much with them. Again, here, probably bidirectional charging would be helpful to increase the kind of services that we can have. So I think it depends a lot on the business cases, but again, being mandatory with that, it will be a big push.
Yeah, maybe if I can compliment. Maybe I think it's good to mention here that one key input that I get from working with DSOs across Europe is that there is still not full consensus around the topic of B2G. There are still so many question marks. For instance, most of the focus now in the latest discussion I've been having is put on heavy-duty vehicles, for instance. But for passenger cars, might be a little bit still question marks. So I think that before making it mandatory and putting, at the end of the day, an extra burden to the OEM, we should again look at the benefits and the costs. Also because I had a conversation the other day with a manufacturer, and they were expressing how much they are also underwater because they need to fulfill so many requirements and they need to change so many things that it's also hard. And I think that to prevent a big clash, we should go step by step and wait a little bit before mandating things, to see first how they evolve and how they work and which ones do have value for the society at the end.
Okay, very good. So it sounds like, yeah, still similar to the on the markets as well, vehicles as well. There's still some uncertainty, still some things that we need to look at. I mean, I think technically it seems we've been able to demonstrate the solutions, but now the scale up, right? We're right at that moment where if you have the extra 8,000-9,000 euros, you can put in the vehicle, and you can put it in your charger. If you have a DSO with a program, you can participate with that program. But still, it seems like there's a bit to understand and to really scale it up.
It's also, I think that it's kind of hard to find the perfect match, right? Because you need to have the right user, you need to have the right tariffs, you need to have the right conditions. So it does make it difficult to scale up because the right conditions are not generally met. So I think that's something that is missing.
So let's look for the right cases first. Fleets, maybe large vehicles could be. I heard some discussion on that this morning as well. A lot of activities, buses, heavy duty trucks, those things. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So in the interest of time, we could go on like this forever, I think. We made it. Oh, yes, a question. Excellent. On the mic.
Thank you for the discussions. I have a question. When we are talking about the V2G services, we can look at from the TSO perspective and the DSO perspective. And it's possible that the TSO and DSO are not aligned together. For example, the DSO wants a service, but the DSO cannot provide in the low voltage level. So when we are talking about the DSO and TSO services, who should regulate this one, that when the TSO wants a service from the V2G and the DSO cannot provide, who should regulate these things or orchestrate these services in the national level or in the European level?
Anyone comment on the coordination?
It's thank you, because it's a really interesting question, and it's also something really felt, at least in the Italian environment right now. Actually, local markets, so for DSO needs, are very new in Italy. So we are just developing right now some pilot projects. And also at the beginning of Flow, there was really a lot of discussion on this point. So how to coordinate DSOs and TSOs needs. So who should kind of say the last word. There were discussion about data, common data platform in order to understand which is the real situation, and this kind of the way one or the other should stop one service if it goes again is needs. So kind of traffic lights system or so on. Actually, I know there is another European project with some of the partners that are here that is in Italy is dealing with this topic. I think, but I don't want to say for the DSO, probably one thing that I catched from this discussion is that probably services required by the TSO, maybe being less local, can be solved probably easier also if we don't go exactly with that resource that also the DSO is needing, while the DSO has less margin of intervention. So I had this in mind, that probably being more local, the DSO could say the last word, meaning if I don't do that, something bad will happen to my grid, while the TSO maybe has the opportunity to go a bit wider. But I'm not sure actually of how the discussion is going, and also outside Italy, I'm not aware.
Very briefly, maybe from my side, just generally reading EU legislations targeting the grids. I think when it comes to V2G, I think European decision makers don't make a distinction between TSO and DSO's role in V2G. I think it's more treated as grid operators should enable or should support V2G where possible. So from my understanding, I don't see that there should be a discrimination when it comes to enabling V2G among grid operators. So, but yeah, I don't know if you would like to add. Yeah. Just generally, I think we don't need to, in my opinion, we don't need to target TSO or DSO, but where relevant, where the service is provided, then TSO or DSO should be handling this.
From a mobility perspective, it might be covered, right? It should be indifferent to it, but then let the system operators decide how they want to coordinate. And then whenever they're ready, they can aggregate EV flexibility. Okay. Yeah, please.
Yeah, just a very fast comment. I agree with totally with what Filippo says. Usually TSOs have more tools to deal with congestion and these kind of things. Reporting again from Denmark, there is a bit of friction in that sense because the biggest promoter of V2G in Denmark is the TSO, is Energinet, who's also going to Germany and participating to roundtables to try to push for it. In the meanwhile, there's a couple of companies who are advising DSOs for planning and operation. I was in a meeting with a few of them a few months ago. That are going around saying that V2G is going to be the downfall of distribution systems, and unluckily they are being listened quite a lot. So it depends on the message that you get through. If you listen to a very progressive TSO in this case, or DSOs which are dealing with other problems, and they are, in my opinion at least, badly advised. This is the situation at the moment, at least in Denmark, which is smaller market maybe compared to Italy, but yeah.
Okay. So maybe join me in thanking the panel for their discussion today. And this also brings us to a conclusion for our event today. We have our photo. Hopefully we've been able to convey the developments that we've had in this project, also the outreach that we've been able to engage with, give you the resources that you need to be able to find that information. So I would, if I can get there. Yeah, just putting up some of the social information if you need to find it, website at the bottom. Like we said, the idea is this event will be recorded, so it'll be available afterwards, but obviously there's a lot more material to go with that. And from the discussions we had today and the different breaks, sounds like there's a number of touch points where we can already interact with some of the people that were here, and I'm sure there's plenty more online as well, so feel free to reach out. So thanks everyone for your presentations, for your contributions, for your joining today, for your questions. Thank you all. I guess we do have some more time here for some more networking if you want. So take your time as you leave. Got some, I think, some snacks and things in the other room still left. Thanks again.